The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Antoni Martí Petit, Head of the Government of the Principality of Andorra. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency. I have a great pleasure in welcoming His Excellency Antoni Martí Petit, Head of the Government of the Principality of Andorra, and I invite him to address the General Assembly.
Señora Presidenta, Señor Secretary General,
Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for the people of Andorra, 2018 is a year of celebration in two ways, globally and locally. On the 28th of July, the Principality of Andorra celebrated 25 years since its entry into the United Nations, and on the 10th of December, we will mark 70 years since the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These two events have, as I have already mentioned, a double meaning, a global one and a local one. This is what some people call glocal. In fact, the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights has a global dimension for Andorra, just as it does for the other countries that make up the international community. However, it also has great local roots because fundamental rights have been respected in Andorra since time immemorial. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that the Andorran Constitution expressly states that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is in force in Andorra. For this reason, our country wished to play an active role in the campaign Stand Up for Human Rights, emphasizing the dissemination of the notion of the importance of human rights in the field of education. The High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, with whom I have had the honor of coinciding in the Ibero-American community in recent years, knows that she may count on Andorra to ensure that the declaration made on the 10th of December 1948 is as valid and as strong as ever before, because, as I've already stated, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was already part of Andorran positive law even before Andorra became part of the United Nations. Now, I would ask you to think back to what the world was like 25 years ago, when Andorra joined this organization as a full member. 1993 was a time of hope for everyone. The fall of the Iron Curtain and the end of the Cold War gave way to a wave of unprecedented democratization. Never had so many people in the world lived under democracy as did during the final years of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st. Human rights were consolidated, economies grew, and various forms of inequality gradually reduced. These were years of peace, cooperation, and multilateralism, years of respect, understanding, and dialogue between cultures and religions. And in our country, on the old continent, these were years of optimism in the long and fruitful process of European construction. Today, we all remember the period with some nostalgia. That was plain to see this summer, as heartfelt tributes were made to Secretary General Kofi Annan, who did so much for peace and multilateralism at the end of last century and at the beginning of this millennium. And we've just seen it this very week during the Peace Summit dedicated to Nelson Mandela, who was, without a doubt, one of the key characters of that historic period. 25 years on, many of the hopes of 1993 have grown blurred contours, and some of the milestones reached have in fact been undone. We have moved backwards. The prestigious non-governmental organization Freedom House has noted year on year a constant decline in democracy across the world since 2006. In its last report, we read that in 2017, only 4 out of every 10 people live in free countries. This slow decline in democratic regimes has been accompanied by an increase in inequality, intolerance, and and also extremism. Even in the most established democracies, we increasingly hear the voices of those people who, for many years, have suffered discrimination in silence: women, persons with disabilities, victims of sexual abuse or abuse of any kind. All of this is a clear demonstration that our optimism 25 years ago was somewhat naive. However, despite all its disappointments and all of its flaws, we can but continue to defend the international order that was created by the United Nations just after the conclusion of the Second World War. We must defend this order because it is based on three principles that are as elemental as they are universal. All of us have the same rights. What affects all of us must be decided upon by all of us, and any conflict must be solved peacefully and in line with law. And when I say all of us, I refer to everybody individually within a representative democracy, and also countries on an equal footing here at the General Assembly. Representative democracy and multilateralism are the fruit of common values, and therefore it is not surprising that they enter into crisis at the same time. In my view, the democratic multilateral order is threatened by two extremes: populism and technocracy. In the face of complex problems, populism proposes solutions that are simple, but that are not really solutions, because ultimately they create new problems and question democratic principles and values. Technocracy, in the face of complex problems, proposes solutions that are complex and elitist, solutions that are not, in fact, inclusive, solutions instead that generate inequality and cast many people aside. Moreover, populism fuels on the disappointment of those people who have been left aside and who have suffered from exclusion, a lack of understanding, and inequality. In recent years, we have said time and time again that the world is struggling between opening up and closing down, between multilateralism and unilateralism, between cooperation and protectionism. But perhaps the mistake resides in wishing to present things in this way. All too often, defenders of the multilateral order and of globalization have believed that we have not made any mistakes, and rather that it is others who are wrong. We think in this way without seeing that globalization has created antibodies, and that not all antibodies are harmful, because perhaps not every kind of globalization is good. In the face of this dialectic between opening up and closing down, we should not seek confrontation, but rather balance. There needs to be a balance between cosmopolitanism and being deeply rooted in tradition, because there are advantages to both. All too often, we have commented on the fact that the risk of protectionism, populism, and closing down exist without realizing that there is also another risk, that of elitist, inhumane globalization, which is not very inclusive, if at all. Very often, the solutions we have found to major international issues, whether these be geopolitical, economic, or social, are solutions that do not consider people, and solutions that go against one of these slogans of the United Nations, the call to leave no one behind. Therefore, I have a very favorable view of the theme chosen by the President of this General Assembly, María Fernanda Espinosa, with whom we also share the Ibero-American community. She says, she's chosen the theme, making the United Nations relevant to all people, and this means building peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies. Ladies and gentlemen, the action of the United Nations, and by extension that of the entire international community, must be inclusive and focused on the real problems of people, because if we do not do this, we will be persevering with our mistakes. We would be reinforcing the image of institutions that are difficult to understand and far removed from the concerns of the people, and we will be opening the door further to populism. This is why Andorra wishes to play a particularly active role in promoting and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. These goals are focused on the specific tangible needs of the global population. They are major global goals that have local impacts and are locally relevant. If these goals are achieved, they will reinforce the bonds that are so necessary between people and institutions. Andorra presented its first voluntary national review on the Sustainable Development Goals at the high-level political forum of the ECOSOC last July. As explained in the review, our government has for some time been working on classifying various political endeavours according to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the 2030 Agenda. Our government has also launched a campaign to involve the education community, civil society and private enterprises in promoting and achieving the various goals. This is a way of opening up and of bringing the United Nations and its agenda closer to the people. In our opinion, innovation and new technologies play a very important role in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. It is for this reason that we need a cross-cutting alliance between the public and private sectors so that we can place technological progress in the service of the 2030 Agenda. We have assessed our performance on 6 Sustainable Development Goals linked to the environment: water and sanitation, clean accessible energy, sustainable cities, responsible consumption and production, protecting life on Earth, and combating climate change. A number of the actions introduced by the government in recent years seek to achieve these goals: the ongoing improvement of air and water quality, a comprehensive plan of energy transition whose aim is to reduce our dependence on energy from the outside and to promote renewable energy. There will be direct grants for renovating buildings according to energy efficient criteria, and so on and so forth. All of these actions aim to fulfill the 2030 Agenda. Andorra has also emphasized 2 more goals: measures to combat climate change and quality education. Because these are 2 things with which the Andorra society identifies across the board. Therefore, we champion the validity of the agreement on climate change that many countries signed here in New York in April 2016. And we insist upon the fact that the international community must comply with the agreements and commitments made in Paris in December of 2015. We reiterated this last December in Paris during the One Planet Summit, championed by the Secretary General and by the President of the French Republic and the co-prince of Andorra, Emmanuel Macron. Andorra is working to fulfill the commitments of the Paris Agreement and strongly encourages the rest of the international community to do the same. As regards quality education, Andorra is proud of having a rich, diverse, all-embracing education system that is available to all citizens. It is a system in which families can opt for Andorran, Spanish or French education with no additional cost for any option. It is an educational system which prepares our young people to become citizens of a global world while being deeply rooted in their own identity. This is perhaps why a great many initiatives for Andorran international cooperation focus on education. Several Andorran non-governmental organizations, with the financial support of the government, are conducting projects to promote training and opportunities for street children in Bolivia, to educate young girls in Honduras, and to provide schooling for poor children in Madagascar. Excellencies, In choosing the theme for this General Assembly, our President talks to us about leadership and shared responsibilities. Global leadership and shared responsibilities for peaceful, equitable and sustainable societies. This would seem to me to be a key issue. If we allow the action of the United Nations, and by extension that of the entire international community, to move away from people's real needs, we will be losing leadership. Faced with the increase in populism and the rising tide of extremism, political leaders often feel they are misunderstood. However, misunderstood leaders do not exist, because a misunderstood leader is not a leader. A leader who does not connect with his people is not a leader. The United Nations cannot afford the luxury of disconnecting from the problems, needs, expectations and hopes of these citizens of this globalized world. Therefore, Andorra supports the plans to reform the architecture of the United Nations that are being conducted by Secretary General Guterres and his team. A more efficient management of resources is necessary, and particularly necessary is a management of these resources focused on people. That is crucial. Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, friends of the international community, please allow me in this final part of my speech to recount a personal anecdote. 7.5 years ago, I took on the responsibility of leading the government of the Principality of Andorra. This was a responsibility that the ballot box bestowed upon me once more in March 2015. Therefore, this will be the last time that I take part in a United Nations General Assembly. In Andorra, the men and women of my generation entered into political life during the approval of the 1993 Constitution, and that entry into political life coincided with the recognition of our country as a full member of the international community. I was elected a member of the Parliament the same year that Andorra became a part of the United Nations. Therefore, I am a child of that era of optimism to which I referred at the beginning, of those years in which democracy was expanding, economies were growing, and multilateral institutions were strengthening. However, it was up to me and the people of my generation to take on the responsibility of government in a time of crisis, economic crisis, social crisis, and a crisis of values. At a time when what we believed to be solid and resistant was in fact proving to be fragile and unstable. Over time, we have grown accustomed to living with this awareness of fragility and instability. When all is said and done, maybe that is not such a bad thing. Our predecessors, Andorra's previous generations, were acutely aware of the fragility of the balances on which our extremely old institutions stand. If I compare it with the spirit of optimism which prevailed 25 years ago, the symbol of our times, of this point in time, is precisely this awareness of fragility of the economy, institutions, the worldwide geopolitical order, the environment, the planet as a whole. Everything seems to us to be much more fragile and at much greater peril. From this awareness of fragility, we have found the strength to undertake actions that had been sitting in a drawer for years, to undertake reform that had been pending for decades, to have a more open, transparent, and cooperative economy, to build a more inclusive and all-embracing society, to find sustainable models of growth, and to preserve the institutions and values that have been handed down through history, adapting them to make them useful for the people of today. Out of necessity we have made virtue. I would say that out of weakness we have found strength, so that younger generations may take up the reins of their times and do so with the same optimism that we harbored 25 years ago. We must work until our last breath to ensure that our disappointments become their hope, so that our mistakes give rise to their ability to prevent them from happening again, and so that our good choices are the foundation on which they can continue to build peaceful, equitable, and sustainable societies. And older generations and younger generations should always be aware that everything that happens in the global arena has local repercussions, and that all the actions that we undertake on a local level contribute to shaping the global society, which is much more fair in nature. A global society in which everybody feels that they are listened to and included. This is a global society to which Andorra, because of its small size, but also because of the serenity which prevails as a result of centuries of peaceful existence, is fully committed. The Secretary General is aware of this, as is the President of this 73rd General Assembly, and as are all of our friends in the international community. Politicians move on. Countries and institutions remain. And I am sure that in the future you will continue to count on the principle of Andorra to construct a fairer and safer world. This is our task. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the head of the government of the Principality of Andorra for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will now hear a statement by His Excellency Josiah Voreki Bainimarama, Prime Minister and Minister for Itauke Affairs, Sugar Industry and Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Fiji. May I request protocol to escort His Excellency? I have a great pleasure